Hello YouTubers, my name is Frederick Lopez, and in honor of Underworld Blood Wars, I decided to go over my favorite vampire and werewolf films. Now, I really dig vampires, and my last name Lopez practically means wolf. So I already reviewed, or went over, so to speak, my favorite werewolf films, and right now I'm going to list my top 15 favorite vampire films. So I figure I start off with number 15. I really love this German film back in 2010 called We Are the Night. It's about a group of female vampires. Now we're introduced to the main protagonist. She's kind of a troublemaker on the run, and this police officer is after her. And there's going to be kind of a romance in the film, but she pretty much gets introduced to these women inside this nightclub, and they basically want her to join them. And they make her into a vampire, and the best way to describe this is pretty much like The Lost Boys, but it's pretty much The Lost Girls. Now, it's a German film, and I originally saw it in an English subtitle, so if I were you, I'd go to Amazon and check out the German version, because we all know, like many foreign films, the English dubbing is not the best, but you're still able to get the story either way. And it's an intriguing tale. Not only is it beautifully shot with the cinematography, great soundtrack, Nightlife by IAMX, and it's a very intriguing story, and also we get to go in depth over the women inside this vampire club, and very heartbreaking tales, some of them, about immortality. And it has a certain beauty that I've seen in Interview with the Vampire and other vampire films. It all around feels like a mixture of like The Lost Boys, Blade, with a bit of Underworld, and Interview with the Vampire, but kind of mixed into a modern tale with like the look of like Girl Dragon Tattoo. It is a rare film to find and a hidden gem, and I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite vampire films of recent years. Number 14 on my list is a 1936 film that's in fact a sequel, but also a very female-driven vampire film called Dracula's Daughter, starring Gloria Holden. This is a very underrated sequel in my opinion, and one of the best female vampires in the history of cinema. It follows a Bela Lugosi Dracula and is pretty much about Dracula's daughter and her coping with being a regular person now, even though she used to feel like a vampire since Dracula's dead. It's her struggling with the thirst and her having a normal life and her feelings. And it's not as well made as Dracula, but in fact it's superior in many ways as well. And it's one of my favorite sequels to the Universal Horror Monsters films. Probably my favorite along with Bride of Frankenstein. If you haven't got a chance to check out the Bela Lugosi Dracula or any of its sequels, I would highly recommend them. And check out Dracula's Daughter. It's a very underrated film. And it's just a classic in my opinion, and it's a really interesting character and take on the Dracula lore. And it's a female character, which is long before all these films right now, so it's very interesting looking at a female vampire who is in fact related to Dracula, but what she goes through and the feelings of the vampire. It's almost precursors of stuff we've seen in Interview with the Vampire or Underworld with the character of Selene, so I would highly recommend it. Number 13 on my list is a 2009 film called Daybreakers. Now this is kind of a science fiction vampire film, but Daybreakers stars Sam Neill, Willem Dafoe, and Ethan Hawke. And pretty much what it's about is vampirism, and kind of like I Am Legend, vampirism is like this virus that just takes over and people get like a common cold and become vampires. So it's almost like a disease that spread and basically evolved the human race into bloodsuckers. And the problem is that humans are dwindling in numbers and blood is running out of supply, so there has to be the substitute for real blood, and they have to struggle for existence. And we get to see that through Ethan Hawke's character, who works for this corporation that makes the blood and stores humans. And we get to see him deal with being a vampire. And deep down, much like Louis in Interview with the Vampire, some other vampire works, we get to see him kind of regret being a vampire. We kind of get to see him miss being human. And that complicates things when a person like Willem Dafoe's character comes in, and he used to be a vampire and find a cure for vampirism. So the main goal is them, Ethan Hawke with a group of like renegade humans trying to come up with a cure to spread globally to turn vampires back into humans. Very, very interesting take on a vampire film, and it's nice seeing a science fiction genre. Again, it kind of has a visual style of Blade with a little bit of Underworld and Matrix, but is more science fiction, and there's some great scares and gore in there as well. Ultimately, it's a very different and original vampire film. Number 12, I have tied for two movies, one in 2003 and 2006, and that is Underworld and Underworld Evolution. Both films are great, they tell a complete story, and I went through the films more into detail in my reviews, you can check on my channel, but Underworld and Underworld Evolution were very different. It's the first time I really got a serious approach at lichens versus vampires, and you get to see death dealers and covens, and what if a vampire society existed, and what if it was in our modern world? And you could definitely tell the influence Blade and Matrix had on Underworld. It had that action vibe that the Matrix had. Cinematography was good, but ultimately it was very gothic and vampiric in atmosphere, and that's what I love about the film. It does not take any prisoners. They're both rated R, they're both serious, dark, vampiric approaches, and I love it. Probably the best original vampire story in the 21st century to come onto screen, and right now it's having its 4th sequel, so we'll have to see what happens. And yeah, both are very, very high adrenaline octane films, tour de forces, and yeah, Kate Beckinsale is the ultimate kick-ass vampire heroine, and it's nice to see a character like that. We've gone from Gloria Holden as Dracula's daughter to Kate Beckinsale as Selene, and yeah, it's a very, very kick-ass character. In my 11th spot, I have this film called Near Dark from 1987. Stars Bill Paxton, Adrian Pasdar, Lawrence Henriksen, and pretty much almost has a cast of aliens. And it's Catherine Bigelow's directorial debut. And I have to say, it is a crazy film and very kind of neo-Western. It's a Western horror film. And you can see kind of like the influences films have had from Near Dark. You see John Carpenter's Vampires, you see from Dusk Till Dawn, you can easily see their influence from Near Dark. And it is a violent and dark picture, not for the faint of heart, and it presents vampires in a very unique way. The word vampire is never mentioned. They're almost like cannibals, almost humans who just terrorize people, but they do burn in the sun. And they do have vampire attributes, so hence they're vampires. And it's a very different film. Pretty much the story is a young man being turned to a vampire by a beautiful woman, and he has to follow this group of renegade vampires. It's almost like the Lost Boys in a way, if they were like gun-running criminals. It's like Lost Boys and From Dusk Till Dawn and John Carpenter's Vampires mixed into something with a little bit more of like the horror films in the 80s and a bit of Terminator. Like, it is a really original film. It's very intense and grounded. And it's kind of a hidden gem in my opinion. It's a cult classic, and if you haven't seen Near Dark, I would highly recommend it. I just recently saw it after hearing good words about it, but Quentin Tarantino lists that as one of his favorite films. So definitely go see Near Dark. Okay, number 10 on my list is from 1998 called John Carpenter's Vampires. Now this is a really, really great film. Another cult classic, and it's one of my favorites. It's very different. One of John Carpenter's best films, and highly underrated, especially from the 90s. James Woods gives a great performance as a vampire hunter, Jack Crow, and it has some other actors in there. One of the Baldwin brothers is in it, but ultimately it's about a group of vampire hunters after vampires. It's about vampires, but it's very different. It's in the desert. It kind of has that Western vibe, yet they don't sleep in coffins. They sleep underground during the day and then come out. So it's very different in that regard, but it goes by the old school rules, and they're not romanticized vampires. That's a great part. James Woods even makes a joke saying like, these aren't your European like fags or whatever. These are real bloodsuckers who kill their monsters. They're not the romanticized version. And I like that. It's a very different kind of like modern Western horror approach that's grounded with vampire hunters. We don't get too many vampire films that have really great hunters, and James Woods is one of my favorite vampire hunter characters. It's nice seeing like a group of adults just going and hunting vampires. And one of my favorite John Carpenter films, again, like some on this list, a very different vampire film. So if you haven't seen John Carpenter's Vampires, go see it. And the sequel's not as good, but go ahead and see Vampires Los Muertos with Bon Jovi. Number 9 on my list is from 2007 called 30 Days a Night. Now this was based on a graphic novel. It stars Josh Hartnett, and it's a very scary film. Like this film, Jesus Christ, this brought vampires back to being really dark and just like, they're the monsters. There was no romanticized vampires, much like John Carpenter's Vampires, but these were like the real monsters. Like when you became a vampire, it's a bad thing, and they're just forces to be reckoned with. It is an amazing film. I just can't believe it's from the same director who also did Twilight Eclipse. I was just like, what? That other film should have been way darker, but 30 Days a Night is really good. I would skip the straight-to-DVD sequel. The original is intense. Pretty much, they're in Alaska. It's an Alaskan town, and it falls during the winter season where there's no sun, and this clan of vampires just comes into this Alaskan town and terrorizes them, and either kills or turns the civilians, and Josh Hartnett, along with a few other people, have to basically fight during the 30 Days a Night. Very frightening and intense film that's well made, and among one of my favorite vampire films. It brings back the monsters in vampires, a monster element where they're just these undead nocturnal creatures that you cannot stop. And it's very frightening and yet very, very awesome at the same time. Number 8 on my list is from 2002, and it is a sequel, and probably one of the best sequels I've seen, called Blade 2. Directed by Guillermo del Toro. Blade 2, the first Blade was a great film, but I get to that in a bit. Blade 2 is one of the better sequels I have seen. It's Marvel, it's rated R, it's before his Marvel Studios, but Guillermo del Toro did such a great job. I loved his work in Mimic. Later on he did Pan's Labyrinth and the Hellboy films, but Blade 2 is just one of those, again, action-packed films where you could tell it was after the Matrix films, but it wasn't to the point of trying to rip it off. It was still Blade, and yet elevated the Blade franchise into a new level. And they had these vampires. Pretty much the story is Blade's a vampire hunter. He's a daywalker, half human, half vampire. But what happens is that the vampires try to create a new weapon, and it turns against them, which they pretty much have no weaknesses except for sunlight. And the design, their mouths open, they're very Nosferatu looking, very frightening. And it's one of those rare exceptions where you have to have vampires against like other type of vampires. And that makes it very interesting, and the fighting and the story is really well done. It just has everything. Blade 2 is just one of those films you just pop in and it just puts a smile on your face, and one of my favorite vampire films that not only has a great story, but it keeps true to the horror genre elements while still retaining the action elements as well. One of the best comic book movies and just one of the best vampire films made. Blade 2 is one of those rare sequels that is just as good as the original, if not surpasses it in some ways. Number 7, it's from 1998, and it's the first Blade. I just said Blade 2 surpasses it in many ways, but Blade 1 is just such a gritty and just brutal, and I mean brutal film. The first Blade was not only a game changer for the vampire genre, but it was the first Marvel movie. Like before Marvel Studios, like when Marvel started making movies, this was the first one to really break through and open the gate for X-Men and Spider-Man and the rest to come later. If it wasn't for Blade, we may never have had the movies we have today. And it was also an R-rated film. Wesley Snipes does a great job as a character Blade, and Stephen Dorff is fantastic as the villain Deacon Frost. This is a no-holds-barred film, and it does not take any prisoners. This film is a brutal film. Stephen Norrington directed it. He later on directed The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But Blade is one of my favorite vampire films, just one of my favorite comic book films. I mean, it is a brutal film. Chris Christopherson's also in it. But like the fighting and everything and the way the vampires are, it opens up and you have this rave going on, blood falling from the ceiling. The way they feed is just... it goes back to the basic instincts of just animal-like beings. Like, they're vampires, but they're pretty much like animals that feed upon their prey, and I love that. And it also was the first to add, like, this, no pun intended, underworld, where there is this secret world within the world we know. and these vampires control it and are in every part of its infrastructure, and that was very different. And it's also a well shot film. Soundtrack is amazing, and Blade is one of my favorite vampire films. It's highly enjoyable with a great story, and in a way it's kind of a revenge film and an origin film at the same time. Ultimately, the first Blade is a true testament to the genre for not only superhero or comic book based movies, but vampire films as well, and among one of the best I've seen. And the vampires are not cheesy in it. They're still, when vampires look pretty real and just like convincing. It's one of the better made vampire films. Okay, number 6 on my list is a film from 2008 that later on got remade in 2010, but it's a Swedish film called Let the Right One In. And pretty much it's about this bullied boy who befriends this girl. Both the remake and the original kind of have a similar plot. The thing is, this girl is in fact a vampire. And I won't go too much into the plot, but that's pretty much what you need to know. So it's about letting the right one in. She has this guardian, and like, she's a vampire. So there's a lot of stuff you can imagine happens when a kid befriends this young girl who's in fact a blood-sucking Nosferatu member of the undead. Very, very well-crafted film. One of my favorite films of the past decade, and it's another great Swedish film. Sweden has had some great films, and Let the Right One In is such a great foreign film, and a great, well-made vampire film. And I use great, well-crafted, and well-made a lot, but Let the Right One In is definitely one of those different, original type of vampire films that is unique and also very different from the rest of the bunch. And I respect it for that, and it's a very intriguing film at that, well shot, with a great story. And I highly recommend watching it. If you have a thing for independent films or foreign films, definitely check out Let the Right One In. And if you've seen the remake, Let Me In, definitely check out the original. The original is great in many ways, much like the original version of Insomnia or The Girl with Dragon Tattoo. It's a rare hidden gem of a film that I would highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Okay, number 5, I'm on my top 5, is a film from 2000 called Shadow of the Vampire. Not many people may have heard of this film, but I first saw it on HBO. It is a fantastic, and again, original film. It's overused, but like John Malkovich is in it, as well as William Dafoe, and pretty much Shadow of the Vampire. I don't know if, for those watching who are familiar with Nosferatu, the film, with the vampire, with Count Orlok, played by the actor Max Schreck. Pretty much in the real life, Max Schreck never left makeup. He was always looking like a vampiric Nosferatu with the pointed ears and bald head. So you never really got to see him look like a regular person outside some of the photos. And of course, Nosferatu was too much like Dracula, and they got sued, and a lot of the copies were burned of the film, but some were saved and now are seen in a silent film. So some copies of the film exist. Anyway, Shadow of the Vampire is pretty much about the making of the film Nosferatu from 1922. But it implies that Max Schreck was not an actor, but in fact a real vampire. And William Dafoe gives one of the best performances I have seen from him in his career. Very, very underrated film and underrated performance from him. He gives it his all, and he's truly frightening in the makeup as Max Schreck. He is just like this ugly, just Nosferatu, man. He's a member of the undead. He's just grotesque and monster-like. He's just something about it's unsettling in the way. It's just something's unsettling. It's like Danny DeVito's a penguin. Just something just does not look normal about this guy. He looks freaky. John Malkovich is the director of Nosferatu. So there's a lot played on scenes of how they're made in the film, but then this guy might have been a real vampire, and it plays upon like a possible history of the film where Max Schreck is this vampire. So it's a Shadow of the Vampire. So for those who love vampire films, different films in general, just into making movies or love vampire films and vampire history, definitely check it out. It is an underrated film, and I would highly recommend it. It's among one of my favorite vampire films ever made. And it's just ultimately cool playing at a historical angle like that. Number 4 on my list is Dracula from 1931, Universal Pictures, and I've gone into detail about this film in a movie review on my channel, but of course it stars Bela Lugosi, and this was the vampire film to not only define but to start all vampire films. Bela Lugosi's performance was fantastic. He played Dracula on the stage before in the theater, and he wanted to play it so bad in this movie. He got a chance to play Dracula, And I'm surprised the man never won an Oscar before. It's quite sad because he was truly a wonderful actor, character actor, and he is Dracula. Every person, every performance you've seen of Dracula came from Bela Lugosi's approach. Even Count Chocula on Serial came from Bela Lugosi's voice. I just love it. He just oozes charisma, appeal, and just like an all-around seductiveness and kind of fierceness without overacting too much. He just is. There's a presence to him that I have not seen from many other actors who've played Dracula, but only a couple of other few. I just love the opening, and it's in black and white. And there's two versions with Philip Glass having the score and then no score. It originally never had a score, and I love the version with no music. It's just frightening with just the atmosphere and just natural sounds. And I just love his voice, which is like, "Listen to them, children of the night, what the music they make." I just love that delivery of "Children of the Night, what music they make. I bid you welcome." Great stuff. Van Helsing's in it. Of course, it had to be lowered in budget because of the Depression, so it was more like a stage play the way it was blocked. But still a well-crafted film. I love the beginning of Chbosky's Swan Lake. Many of the Universal Pictures films had that, but Dracula 1931 is just an all-around kind of creepy, atmospheric film. And yes, it may not have the effects or action, but if you have the patience for it or just love vampires in general, even if you like the film or do not like it, you're bound to respect and appreciate Dracula 1931 for what it is. And it's among one of my favorite. I used to have the VHS. I now have the DVD into the Legacy Collection. And Dracula is what I want to strive towards in making a vampire film. And it has stuff that's missing from later on films that we've seen. And Bela Lugosi is just iconic. He is Dracula. When he passed away, he was even buried with the Dracula cape. It's just so associated with him, and because of his brilliant performance and the way that film was, it shaped the vampire genre in cinema forever. It cemented its place in history, and I love the film for that. Number 3 on my list is a 1985 film called Fright Night, directed by Tom Holland, who also directed Child's Play. But Fright Night, one of my favorite 80s vampire films, along with another one I'll get to in a bit. But Fright Night is a great, underrated film. I like it better than the new one, but the original, pretty much the story is with William Wagsdale. He plays this guy named Charlie, and he believes his next-door neighbor is a vampire. He sees him bring a coffin in, and then the next night he's doing his homework, and he sees Jerry Dandridge, his next-door neighbor, basically seduce this woman and, kill her. And he hears it on the news that this woman is missing. And he suspects that his next-door neighbor is a vampire. The only thing is, nobody believes him. And there's this there's this character named Peter Vincent, who's like a Vincent Price character. He was named after Peter Cushing's Van Helsing and Vincent Price, the actor. He has a show called Fright Night, which is like a vampire film TV show, hosting. He hosts different horror films. Anyway, his show just got canceled, and Charlie thinks he's a real vampire hunter. He's like, "I'm just an actor." Anyway, later on, make a long story short, his friends believe him later. The vampire hunter believes in Peter Vincent, and Charlie now has to run from Jerry Dandridge, who's trying to kill him. Now, I go through this more in my Fright Night review, which you can check, but Fright Night is just all around a great film. It's one of the perfect 80s vampire films. What's his name? Chris Sarandon. Prince Humperdinck from Princess Bride plays a great role as Jerry Dandridge. Again, he has that seductiveness while yet being fierce, and I just love the tropes of them making fun of the vampire genre in a way. And them trying to use crosses is you have to have faith in order for this to work on me. And then one of my favorite lines where he was just evil, they have the show where he says, "Welcome to Fright Night." And he does it in a spooky voice where it's just "Welcome to Fright Night." And then he's just "For real." The way he says that is perfect. It has some great effects, some scary elements in there, and the soundtrack again is amazing. Just an all-around feel-good, well-crafted vampire film. And I like it with the character. He's a relatable, all-American teenager. He's like a regular person, and I like that. You don't get to see that very often anymore. And also, it makes it a very sympathetic character where nobody believes that this vampire is real. And they play upon all this history of the vampire, and it's one of my favorites. Okay, number 2 on my list is a 1987 film, which is my other favorite film from the 80s that is a vampire flick, called The Lost Boys, directed by Joel Schumacher. The Lost Boys is just a cool film. Now, I saw this on Sci-Fi Channel back in 1998, or 99, excuse me. And pretty much, it's set in Santa Carla. You have Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland. It's directed by Joel Schumacher. The guy did Batman Forever, go figure, and Batman and Robin. He's actually done some other good films besides the Batmans. I don't know why the Batmans turned out the way they did. But Lost Boys, they moved to Santa Carla. Their mother was recently divorced, played by Diane Wiest. And they go live with their grandpa. And it's them in Santa Carla, and Michael, Jason Patric, basically runs into this group of vampires. They're like a biker gang. He doesn't know they're vampires, so he gets tricked into drinking vampire blood. And as you can imagine, a lot of craziness happens, and it is a very well crafted film. They ultimately have to find the head vampire to basically stop him from becoming a full vampire, and they also have to run into the gang of the Lost Boys. And the Lost Boys is also called that because it plays upon the trope of Peter Pan and the Lost Boys being missing children in Santa Carla. So it's a very cool and, again, original vampire film. And the effects are just amazing. I love Kiefer Sutherland's character, which is like, initiation's over, Michael. Time to join the club. And he comes out of the shadows, and it oozes vampirism. It's vampire. It's a vampiric character. And I just love the film. It's one of those just rare classic 80s films. It's a cult classic at that. And I'm glad it's finally appreciated. It has 2 DVD sequels, which are pretty much spin-offs, but there's only one, The Lost Boys. And if you haven't seen The Lost Boys, get off your ass and go see it. The Lost Boys is one of my favorite vampire films and one of the best 80s films. It is a product of its time, and I love it for that. Soundtrack's great. Cry Little Sister is terrific in the soundtrack. Vampires actually fly in that movie. They're just cool. Vampires are cool. It's one of them where they're still fierce, they're still monsters, but you want to be the Lost Boys. You want to be one of them. You want to be a vampire. And it makes vampires cool without making it too romantic and too much like that Twilight series. Lost Boys is an amazing film, and it has the 2 Corys, Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. And yeah, if you haven't seen The Lost Boys, go check it out. It is a cult classic and just all-around fun film. Catchphrases like sleep all day, party all night, man, it's fun to be a vampire. And I just love, before I leave, Kiefer Sutherland's just like, you never grow old, you never die, but you must feed. Just great stuff. It's all around entertaining film. Okay, number 1 on my list. We're finally there. I have 2 films that are my number 1 most favorite. One of them being like, I think the most well-made and just like gothic and vampiric film ever. The other one's like that, but the other one's because it's a film that got me into vampires. So I go into the vampiric gothic film, and that is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The only other actor, in my opinion, who's played Dracula well, besides Bela Lugosi, is Gary Oldman in Bram Stoker's Dracula. It has Gary Oldman, Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, Cary Elwes. It's just a phenomenal cast. Keanu Reeves is probably the only weak link in that, but even then, that doesn't bring the film down. And Gary Oldman, as always, is a chameleon. He is a fantastic actor, and he brings his A game and brings his all as Dracula. What I love about this, it's in color, but Francis Ford Coppola shot it in a way of like the Italian filmmaking and like Italian films. He shot it in that type of way, which makes it very different. Also, great use of practical effects. The score is amazing. It's used on a whole bunch of movie trailers, including The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. And Winona Ryder is always beautiful, yet very talented as Mina. Anthony Hopkins is one of my favorite, just kind of batshit crazy Van Helsings. He's an older guy, but definitely could carry his own weight against vampirism and Dracula. And Gary Oldman, yeah, they combine. What I love about this film is that they combine the book character of Dracula, as from Count Dracula. They combine Count Dracula with Vlad Tepes in history. Vlad the Impaler. is in Wallachia before his Romania, and you get to see the historical version of what Dracula is based off on, combined with the fictional version. So you have Vlad the Impaler story combined with Count Dracula, and it makes it a very original film. And the first 5 minutes is just fantastic. It shows how he becomes Dracula, and many films will try to replicate it. Dracula Untold try to replicate it, but you know what? The first 5 minutes of Bram Stoker's Dracula tells that story much better than the entirety of Dracula Untold, and Bram Stoker's Dracula is an all-around dark, vampiric, and gothic film, and it is not for the faint of heart. This is the way vampire films should be made. Not only does it match the horror genre and the vampire genre, but it's just a well-made film, period. And I really, really love the film. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go see it, especially if you like gory stuff, well-made stories, and just all-around entertaining but yet bizarre, crazy films. Go check Bram Stoker's Dracula and read the novel. Okay, the next film on my number 1 spot holds a special place in my heart. It's a 1994 film, and some of you out there may know what film I'm about to talk about, but it's based upon the 1976 novel written by Anne Rice called Interview with the Vampire. Yes, from 1994 is the film I saw that got me into vampires. I was little, and Interview with the Vampire was the first film that I ever saw that brought me into this world of vampires. And the novel changed the rules for vampires. It redefined the vampire rules. Bram Stoker's Dracula made the rules as far as a novel, and then Anne Rice in 1976 with Interview with the Vampire changed and redefined them, and the film did the same thing. It stars Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Kirsten Dunst, Antonio Banderas, Stephen Ray, and Kristen Slater. And pretty much the story is about Louis, who is played by Brad Pitt. He finds this interviewer named Daniel, played by Christian Slater, and Daniel interviews this vampire, and Louis recalls his entire life up until that point, till present day. And the film starts off in Louisiana. He owns a plantation. He just got over the death of his wife and kid, and he wants to die. And he meets the vampire Lestat, played by Tom Cruise, who offers him the gift of immortality. And the whole film is them two living through life, and basically Louis living through life as a vampire. And I love that because the vampire has always been this monster figure. And yes, later on films romanticized it, and this film is a little bit like a romanticized version of a vampire, but we feel sympathy for him. He is a monster still. Louis feels like a monster, and we actually get to see the world through the eyes of a vampire, how history changes, what mortality, immortality means to them, life and death. It's a very unique tale, and I really have not seen very much done afterwards that's been like it. A lot of films have taken point from it. And Interview with the Vampire had a sequel called Queen of the Den, but it was nowhere near the quality of Interview with the Vampire. Interview with the Vampire was a far superior film, but it had a history of novels, a series of novels called The Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, but that film is what got me into vampires. I did a more in-depth review on my channel you can check out. Some of my favorite quotes is from Antonio Banderas, where he puts his hand through a candle and is like, "This is the only real evil left in the world." Brad Pitt gives one of his best performances in his career, and one of the best in the 90s. He has so many brilliant performances in the 90s, but he plays a very tragic and yet flawed and sympathetic character as Louis, as he is this vampire who has to basically live as an immortal, see the people he loves die over and over, and see things in the world change around him as he is this creature. Tom Cruise is amazing as Lestat. He is the vampire Lestat, and you don't really see Tom Cruise play that many villains. This is one of his few roles where he played a villain. Now, Lestat is a protagonist yet an antagonist, but he's pretty much a villain in this installment, and Tom Cruise does a brilliant job. You can tell he relishes being evil, and it's also one of the few roles where you don't even see Tom Cruise. You just see the vampire Lestat. Kirsten Dunst does an amazing job. It's one of her early roles, and she was a child, and she has so much complexity and just intensity in this character of Claudia that really shows her range she would have in later roles. Neil Jordan directs it. He did The Crying Game. Just a beautiful film. It is a perfect film in my opinion. An Interview with the Vampire is one of those rare films that does something different and just redefines everything you know about the vampires while still remaining true to the vampire lore. It's great. I love Guns N' Roses' Sympathy for the Devil music cover at the end, and Anne Rice also wrote the screenplay, but it's one of those films that is just, when you see it, it's going to forever change not only your movie-going experience, but just life and just the way you look at vampires. It's going to change everything, and I recommend reading the novel. The novel is a very well-written novel. It's written over 40 years ago now, and it's still as relevant today as it was back when it came out. And that's a true testament to a brilliant piece of literature. Yeah, Interview the Vampire is among my favorite vampire films. And if you haven't checked it out, definitely get off your ass and check it out. I mean, Interview the Vampire is one of those rare films that I can talk to you about it, but you just have to go see it for yourself. Very different yet amazing vampire film. I also love Brad Pitt at the end where Dale wants to be a vampire. And he's like, have you been listening to my tale? He's like, is this what you want? You want to be food for the immortals? It just goes crazy. Anyway, I digress. I also love, before I digress, Tom Cruise, where he's just like, Louis, Louis, Louis. Always whining, Louis. You like that? I had to listen to that for centuries. I love that. And then Claudia, you've been a very, very naughty little girl. And it has like the piano. Anyway, for those who haven't seen the movie, I look like a crazy person rambling, but for those who have seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Interview the Vampire and Bram Stoker's Dracula are among my favorite vampire films. And Bram Stoker's a very well-made film, and Interview is a very well-made film. And Interview holds a special place in my heart, because if it wasn't for seeing that movie, I would never have been in love with vampires, just everything vampires. And I highly await Underworld Blood Wars. And yeah, I dig vampires, and I went through my list. Let me know if you agree, disagree. Is there anything on the list that you did not see? Any vampire films you recommend? Some honorable mentions I like to mention is From Dusk Till Dawn, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I also like Once Bitten with Jim Carrey. And also, just let me know in the comments below what are your favorite vampire films. If I mentioned some that were on the list that you liked, what were your favorite moments from them? Just anything. And I thank you for watching this video. It was a very long video, but I really, really dig vampires, like I said earlier. And my last name, Lopez, literally means wolf. So if you're into werewolves, check out my other video in which I go over my ranking of my favorite werewolf films. But this is just a brief list of my favorite vampire films. I did not do justice describing them, but go ahead and go to either Amazon, Netflix, Redbox, just anywhere. Go check out these films. You will not regret it, and especially if you're into vampires, you will not regret it. So I thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Go to my Dark Knight of Steel channel. I have a whole bunch of vampire videos. And then on the final cut here, you can go check out other horror movie reviews. And I reviewed Dracula, Interviewed the Vampire, Queen of the Damned, the Lost Boy films, and the Underworlds. So yeah, that's it for this little video, and those are my favorite vampire films. So yeah, listen to them, children of the night. What music they make.